So
Should we gather around here?
we can do that. You can find a place you're comfortable. We also have chairs if you want to grab a chair. So because we are live streaming, I'm Mike Miller. I'm the planning director for the city of Montpelier. And tonight we are doing the first kickoff of the city plan update.
We're not live yet.
Not live yet. Okay. Let me know when we're ready.
Now we are.
Now we're ready. All right. So, hi Donna. So I am Mike Miller. I'm the planning director for the city of Montpelier, and we are here, the planning commission. This is a planning commission meeting, and we are here tonight to kick off the city plan update process. I'm going to go through a quick PowerPoint and review, get everybody up to speed where we're at, what's going on, and we got a pretty small crowd. I don't know if we want to introduce ourselves, certainly at least the planning commission. Identify if you're a planning commissioner.
Sure, I'm Aria Kassam, I'm a planning commissioner.
Joe Castellano, resident of Montpelier on Salem Street.
And Gabe Lajeunesse on the planning commission.
Mike Fitch, I'm the director of the Vermont Crafts Council. I have an office down here at the Center for Arts and Learning, and I'm a Montpelier resident.
Sean Langan, I'm a member of the planning commission.
I'm Maria Arzemas, a member of the Planning Commission.
Brian Mills, Planning Commissioner.
Peter Kelman, I live in Montpelier, I'm a housing advocate.
Jennifer Roberts, I am a resident of Montpelier. Donna Bate, resident of Montpelier.
All right, and I want to thank Maria. We are here at the Wilder Art Center, and Maria has generously opened up her space to let us have the meeting here. And part of that is because one of our topics that we're addressing tonight is arts and culture. So we kind of wanted to start out and kind of respect that and take advantage of some great art space we have here in Montpelier. So I'm going to go over a couple of things relatively quick. So it's a little bit of background and history, what we've been doing for the past 8 years now on the city plan, and then explain what's a city plan, why is it important, talk about briefly 3 chapters, 2 parts. That'll make a little bit more sense when we get there. And then our overall input process, the big picture. This is going to be a 6-9 month process, and then what we're going to be doing tonight. With a small crowd, we may go and kind of change things up and do it standing here rather than having everybody break up into groups. Maybe we'll just keep bringing up the various boards and talking about them separately. So background and history. So for the last 50 years, maybe more, 60 years, this document that we are updating has always been known as the Montpelier Master Plan. And planners and landscape architects and everybody always came up and said, but it's not a master plan. It's a term of art. Master plan is a term of art, and what we have is a city plan. It's not a master plan. So for this update, we are actually going to be changing the name for the first time in 60 years. It is going to be the Montpelier City Plan as opposed to the Montpelier Master Plan. But you'll hear people refer to it as the master plan, and that's why. Our current plan was most recently updated in 2010, and we also did an amendment in 2017. They're valid for only 8 years, so at the time we were updating the zoning, we needed to make sure we had the plan in place to make sure we could do the zoning. So we had to do an update in 2017. Our current plan is good until the end of 2025. Hey, Carlton. So we updated this plan into a completely new format and content. So we did not take the old plan and just revise it. We put the old plan aside and we started all over with a completely new format and content. And this process started in 2016, developing goals and strategies. So the way we went about developing this plan was to break it into its 10 or 12, it's got 11 chapters, break it into the various chapters, and to look at each topic with the committee that works on it. So the housing committee would work on the housing, energy committee would work on energy, historic preservation with historic, and so on. That took a lot of time, and so meeting with those individual committees, that's what has been going on since 2016. We did a lot of that work, and then starting in about 2020, 2021, we started working on the second piece, which is the web-based plan parts. So we've got these chapters, these storyboards. If you've been online, you've seen there are various storyboards. And then there are these boards here, which also show the implementation strategies. So that is the other piece. So this is the product of all those committee meetings with the arts committees and the historic commission and the housing committee. And what's online is what is the result of working with the planning commission, working with their consultant. The new format so we end up with a new format for aspiration, goals, and strategies with a goal of having a more actionable plan. So one of the goals we wanted coming out of these pieces, is a more actionable plan, not just an aspirational plan. I mean, it has aspirations in it, but we didn't want to have a plan that focused on, we want to encourage accessory apartments. Well, we don't want to just encourage accessory apartments. Encouraging them isn't going to actually make any. What are we going to actually do? So what you'll find in here for strategies are actual actionable items, and not just encouraging or supporting or those types of words that don't actually make something. We want to actually say, okay, if you want to encourage accessory apartments, how are you going to encourage them? We're going to do tax breaks, we're going to change regulations, lots of things we can do. That's what you see here, are this new format to make a more actionable plan. And I'll go to, so, what is a city plan? Why is it important? Under state law, city plans must be consistent with the state planning goals. They must be compatible with the regional plan. They must be compatible with neighboring community plans. And they have to contain 12 required elements. So we are taking care of all those requirements to make sure it actually meets those statutory requirements of what it means. If you want to have a plan, you have to follow the state rules for what's included in a plan. But you're actually not required. No community is required under state law to have a plan. But if you don't have a plan, you can't update or adopt any regulations. So you can't have zoning regulations if you don't have a plan. You won't be allowed to participate in Act 250, so you can't participate in state proceedings like Act 250, or Section 248 is the similar process to Act 250, but it is for certificate of public good things like solar panels and solar fields and wind farms. So that's Section 248. But if you don't have a plan, the city as an organization can't participate in that process. And then it's also a necessary requirement for a lot of grants and other programs that the state offers. So if we don't have a city plan, you lose out on the opportunity to apply for grants. So how can a city plan be used? They're really a foundational document, and they can be a long-term guide, a basis for decision-making, programs and investments. It's an action plan with implementation steps. There are lots of ways we can use a plan. And most of these will end up coming into play in our plan. It's a basis for municipal regulations. It's a source of information. It's also a place where we have a lot of smaller plans. And a lot of times you need a place where you can pull these plans together, where you can start to recognize how they interact with each other. And it's a tool for coordination, and it's a standard for regulatory proceedings. So there are lots of ways that we can use the plan. So what were our goals? Planning Commission's goals. So we wanted the storyboards to give the public and decision makers the backgrounds on a topic. What are our goals generally, and what are we going to do to achieve them? So the storyboards part, that's the part that's online. Those are the web storyboards. Those are meant to be your 50,000 foot explanation. If you're just online and you're Googling housing in Montpelier, we're hoping this is what would pop up, and you could get to read it and understand what are the issues, what are the topics, and what are we generally doing about it. The second piece, as I mentioned, were the strategies, which are the detailed implementation steps and the actionable parts, the actionable pieces that are done to achieve those goals. And these are the much more specific pieces everybody's welcome to look at them, but we would really want to have the housing committee know and understand what our housing goals are and our strategies are, and they can start working to advance those goals, or historic resources, or arts and culture, or transportation or energy when those pieces come out. So the idea is we would hope that the council and the staff and the commissions and anyone interested in the public would really have a good understanding of what these implementation boards are. But we understand that not everybody is going to maybe be interested in reading and understanding all those details. If they just want to have a general understanding, that's what our storyboards are trying to get across. So tonight's topics, as I mentioned, arts and culture, historic resources, and housing. So 3 chapters and 2 parts. So hopefully you've started to figure out a little bit. The 3 chapters are these 3 that are listed. The 2 parts are, there's one part that is online, which is the storyboards, and you can see them on the city's website. If you go to the city's website, if you're seeing this online, you can go to the city's website and scroll down to the bottom, and there's a big box for the new plan. If you click on that, it will take you to the page where you can access the storyboards and these historic resources, and these implementation strategies. So each chapter above has a storyboard, and each chapter has implementation strategies. So we have 6 pieces that we're talking about tonight. And all of them are on the website, but they will all eventually be on their own website. So right now they're just plugged into the city's website because the full web page, it is under development. We have the pieces, but we can't give you access to part of it. And so to avoid confusion, we just took those storyboards out and reprinted them in our city website. Each storyboard is in a web-based format, has an introduction, plan context, synergies. So synergies are how plans relate to each other. So our ability to achieve our historic goals might be impacted by, might impact our ability to achieve our energy goals, because we start talking about replacing windows or replacing siding to insulate a building. Well, that's going to damage the historic integrity. How do we balance these conflicts? Sometimes they work together. Your energy goal and your public transportation goal both work together. So that's what the synergies looks at, are how these various plans relate to each other. And each implementation strategy is also built the same way. It talks about aspirations and goals. And goals are basically how we break aspirations into smaller bite-sized pieces. So we might desire to have safe and affordable housing. But we're going to have one goal for safe housing and one goal for affordable housing, because the tools we're going to use to make our housing safe are probably different than the tools we're going to use to make our housing affordable. They're all important, but the aspiration is big, and then we break it into smaller pieces. That's what you'll see as you look through the goals, is the goals are basically taking the aspiration and breaking them into slightly smaller pieces, and then the strategies are those actionable pieces to achieve the goals. And some strategies are new, some strategies are existing. As you look at the boards, you'll see Montpelier Cultural Plan is new for that one. So you'll see some of these are talking about, we need to do something new. Sometimes we need to do something different. We're already doing it, but we need to amend it or change it, and it'll say that. And sometimes it's just continue to do it. The Growth Center program or the downtown program. We should just continue to do those programs because of the benefits they provide. We don't need to do them differently. We just need to do them. So the overall process, I mentioned at the start. So there are 11 chapters total, and we're going to try to do 3 at a time over the next 4 to 6 months. So these are the first 3. We're going to have this 3, 3, 3, 2. So in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we'll do another 3 more chapters. And then we'll do another 3 more probably late in the summer, and then 2 more in the fall. And each of these will have at least 3 different input opportunities, plus comments online and through surveys. So as this ramps up, it's kind of a slowly ramping up process. Evelyn is getting stuff moving. We're going to keep having opportunities, so anyone who misses out on this one, it's going to be available for comment over the next 4 or 5 months. So, and then we'll move into the next one. You can still comment on the old ones, but we're going to move into the next set of 3 in 6 to 8 weeks. But I'll mention now, we had originally scheduled, for anyone who was thinking maybe I'll do Thursday, we had scheduled for this Thursday, not being aware of the fact that it was Corporate Cup. So we're canceling Thursday's meeting, and we're going to reschedule it. So once completed the Planning Commission, so in the overall process, we do this 3-3-3-2 process, and we get ourselves to the, all the review is done. Then the Planning Commission will review all the comments and make revisions to develop a final public hearing document. And that's when the Planning Commission would start warning and going into a public hearing, where there'd be another round of public hearings by the Planning Commission and the City Council. But at this point, we are really looking at trying to see where we are with this document, and I think we have some of that discussed more in the next slide. So the rest of tonight, we had various stations. Like I said, we can do this because we don't have a large crowd. We can certainly go through, bring the boards up. We can talk about what's here. We can look online at those documents as well, or we can still break out if that's what people want. Planning commissioners are here to take some notes and answer questions, but we're looking for your opinions. What do you like, not like, about the look of the various elements? Did we do a good job putting this together? Does it look good? Do the storyboards look good? Do these strategies look good? Do they make sense? Are they confusing? Do you have specific comments about the content? So if you read through these things and you think, you know, this public art strategy is a bad idea, great, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear what's good, what's bad, what you like, because we're going to have to take all these comments and then sit down and balance them with all the other comments and make a decision later on in the summer as to what goes into the final draft. And then do you have questions that we can answer for you? And if there's anything else that you think about later on, there's opportunities to email these comments and put things online. We're going to do surveys. So we're really trying to maximize the opportunities over the next 6 months for people to get to provide comment. I think that's most of this, and I can take some questions or comments now, or we can figure out what we want to do next.
Oh, just a quick comment. I know that you're focusing on historic resources, and obviously there was a focus in the previous zoning to have more housing concentrated downtown. With some of the recent flooding and stuff like that, I wonder what the plans are to redesign or kind of implement more housing downtown, or, you know, these dense growth center areas that we've identified.
Yeah, so the question, I don't know if that some of it gets picked up, was about balancing historic resources and our housing goals, because we had a lot of goals for developing more housing in the downtown, and both of those plans, the housing and the historic resources, were both developed before July. So we may have to go through and reevaluate, rebalance some of these. I don't know how much conflict there is with the historic, because we can still do a lot of infill, other than what we learn now is we now don't allow the first floors to be converted from commercial to residential, whereas before you would have been allowed to do that. So it will have some impact, the flood will have some impact, it already has impacted our regulations. Any other initial questions?
Do you want some time to look at the boards, or?
So we can, like I said, there are 2 parts. One is the 3 storyboards, or the 3 implementation strategies. Yep.
I know that you have different priorities, saying like, okay, cost is high, priority is high. You know, when you say like a high priority, Are you saying something to implement within the next 18 months? Do you have some sort of sense of a timeframe?
They didn't technically have timeframes as much as how we would weigh those in relation to each other on what we wanted to work on first.
Okay.
And so, and initially we just had we just had what were the strategies, and it wasn't really till it came back to the Planning Commission that people said, well, if we're going to make a strategic plan, everything can't be a high priority. So let's go through and start picking out which ones of these would be the ones we would really want to put our effort in on first, and kind of focus on those. And so in some comments people may have is they want to see, you know, a low priority moved up to a higher priority, or vice versa. You made this a high priority, maybe it should be a low priority. Cost was based on, low cost was meant to be anything up to about, you know, $1,000 to $5,000, relatively small cost. The other one was medium, is about that $10,000 to $100,000 range. That's a medium cost project. Something that's high cost is going to be more than $100,000. So that's kind of, we had to put some numbers to it, so that was kind of our thought. Peter?
Is there going to be a full text printed or PDF version of the chapters and the way there has been in the past, or is it all going to be the storyboards?
It's all going to be storyboard. These will be printed. These will be a part of the document. So the implementation strategies will be PDF'd so they can be accessed.
But there won't be chapters with text the way there have been in the past.
Correct. It will
How
be.
was that decision made?
It was based on my recommendation to start, was looking at where other plans had been evolving around the country. And it hasn't happened in Vermont, but in, you know, Oklahoma City and Plano, Texas, and a couple other places, they were finding that plans that were web-based plans, online plans, had more interaction, more downloads when they compared their former PDF plans. How many downloads did we get compared to how many people were actually looking at a web version? And they were finding there was better traffic, more traffic, and that was why they're moving in that direction. So that was why I made the recommendation, and the Planning Commission agreed, and we moved in that direction.
If this is going to be a live document that's going to be guiding us, clearly as we learned this summer, we hadn't learned it before, things change, and sometimes things change very quickly. It's very easy to change a PDF. It is much more difficult and more expensive to change a web-based version of this, as we've seen already, because it's taken you almost 2 years to sort of get it up. I just wonder whether you might not want to have a written version of it as a backup that could be more flexible and keep up to date, because you have had it written. I've seen it. That's what these were based on. You hired a consultant who looked at your written document and did this. And that brings up a second point. Who is checking the factual nature, the grammar, the whatever of this? I mean, these are consultants. They don't actually know our city, and I'm not sure they have proofreaders or copy editors, because there's some egregious errors. Like, what year did we buy Country Club Road? What year? 2022, right? It says 2021 on the storyboard. That's just one of the mistakes I found.
Peter, I'd love to hear if you have some thoughts on, I think that's a good, I mean, I don't know, Mike, if we have the ability to update the web-based plan, but I feel like generally web pages are easier to update actually than written documents, but I'd also love to hear if you have suggestions on, ways that we could have the the document proofread or, something, whether you have a suggestion of.
Well, I mean, I do, but by the way, editing a PDF is a lot easier than making a change on a proprietary platform. You're gonna have to go, unless Evelyn gets trained to do it herself, and she's just a part-time employee, and I don't know that she's gonna have the time to do it, but maybe she would. It's not as easy to make a change on a platform like this as it is in Word, which is how you make a PDF.
Well, I guess in my work, like, it is easier for us, as an organization to make a change to a website versus a PDF, but I'm curious to hear what.
Yeah, these are storyboards, so there does take another level of, it's a different program than the standard program, but it's not that foreign. It requires an ArcGIS license. The city has one, so these are built in. Esri is the company, and they have a product called ArcGIS that kind of generates, you can do storyboards in. So this is kind of coming out of those types of programs. GIS, Geographic Information System, is generally used for mapping. So it's a map-based, which is why if you see a lot of these, a lot of them kind of generate and go through maps as you're looking through them, because it really is a map-based interactive geographic system. But they found it also was helpful for being able to do these storyboards. And so we have the program, we can do it, and it's going to come down to, when we want to do the changes. The hope I have for these, getting to Peter's point about making changes, is that in much the same way that we went through a very long process, a 7-year process to update the zoning. And the point we had was, once we get the zoning updated, we will continually be reviewing them, finding things that need to be fixed, bringing them back to council, and in the 6 years since we've adopted it, we've made 7 amendments to the zoning. My hope is the city plan, it took us 7 years to do it. I don't expect us to take 7 years to do it again. My hope is that once we've got the document, then we can keep coming back and saying, you know what, we had a flood this year. What do we need to review in our city plan? And maybe we need a resilience chapter and we add a new chapter in. Maybe we have it in there, but we need to make some changes. And then we can go in, instead of changing 11 chapters, we find the chapter that needs to get fixed, we review it, and then everyone can have a really detailed conversation. That's what we have now with the city plan, with the city zoning, is we make a set of very finite changes, and everybody, the stuff doesn't get lost. Everybody gets a chance to comment on those specific changes. Do we want to change country club road zoning? And that's what we're talking about. We've got these changes, and we're going to have it. I think we could do the same thing with the city plan. Once we've got it up and running, we can really go through and have a nice detailed conversation about, okay, what are we going to do? Because we need to change our economic development plan, or we need to change our resilience plan. Donna?
The idea that goals and priorities and timing are the same are not true to me. Like, you can have a priority, but it may take many years to get there, but it's always hovering there for your focus, versus you can have a lower priority that's maybe quicker to do. So I find the timeline on things different than the priorities. Is that the way you approach this? I'm just going back to this question.
So the ones we had in here were just cost, priority, and partners. I was just making sure that's what we're in there. So we could add in timeline. We had other columns. These were originally all in Excel files. So there were a number of other columns that we said, just we don't need to put all the information into these various tables. Let's focus on the important ones. We could put timelines into some of these if we think this is, how long will it take to do this? We could add another column into that. So.
Well, I guess likewise, when you make a priority, sometimes you have short-term goals within that long-term, and that within itself sort of defines a timeline. Is that integrated within that?
It's not integrated right now, but it could be. It would take us some time to be able to go through and add that factor into each one of the strategies, but it's not an impossible task. Especially a lot of the ones that are continuing are ones that really have a timeline of 0. We're already doing this. That's a timeline of 0. And so we're really just talking about how long to amend this and how long to start this new program that we're talking about.
So,
Peter?
Mike, could you answer the question of what is your plan for catching errors and changing them? I mean, my suggestion would be you hire a copy editor and you hire a proofreader. Copy editor does fact checking, proofreader makes sure it's grammatically correct, and I mean, there's some clear inconsistencies between the goals here. One of the storyboards refers to goals, and they're not the goals that are there. That's something a copy editor would catch. Copy editor would catch that it wasn't 2021, it was 2022. The proofreader would catch, also, there are references in there to the Housing Task Force. The Housing Task Force doesn't exist anymore.
Yep, and getting these kicked off, because this is a process, we had hoped this process would be in 2020 or 2021. So a number of these, yes, we're going to find those, and there's going to be certainly another round of very careful editing, and it may involve, certainly working within the department. We have different people who are very good who have not read and reviewed these, or we could look outside to do the copy editing as well. But they will get a final review, but we needed to start the process with what we had, knowing that there are going to be errors and things that are going to need to be fixed, because the first thing we need to do is to make sure, are we on the right track? We don't want to spend another 6 months, 8 months making everything perfect to find out the public doesn't think this approach is the right approach. We really want to start with, okay, let's start looking at where we're at and start making those notes. What did we miss? Because we finished that chapter up and we put that to bed 2.5 years ago while we were doing these other pieces, and we haven't gone back to re-review them. So clearly with the housing, if it's talking about housing task force, we've got to go to housing committee. We've got to make a number of amendments. So you are correct with that. But we're also, like I said, looking to make sure we're on the right path. And if we're on the right path, then we can really start to refine these. And if we're on the wrong path, or if we know 5 chapters the public really likes, 3 chapters the public has issues with, then we have to decide, do we go back and reevaluate those 3 chapters? Do we think we're doing okay and we're just going to go forward with them anyways? Those are the conversations the Planning Commission will have based on the input you all give us.
So, Mike, I understand the housing committee for housing and the historic preservation, but there are some very important committees that also ought to be considered. For example, the Social and Economic Justice Committee, advisory committee, the ADA committee, the Homelessness Task Force. These are committees with many of these chapters impact their purview. And for example, I felt that the housing chapter was kind of deficient in talking about homelessness or even economic inequality. So I would suggest that you engage these other committees where there are synergies or lack of synergies.
Yeah. So homelessness we did work with, but CJAC we did not. And the other one I don't believe we did. ADA, yeah, that's
I mean, even something like Complete Streets or Tree Board, I mean, we have a lot of committees, and I think that would be a more effective way of engaging the community than putting out a notice that turned out 5 members of the community here tonight. If you really work through all the committees, not just the obvious ones, voila, you've got a whole bunch more people engaged. And we saw this 2 summers ago on Country Club Road. We had 50, 60, 70 people showing up for that, because that was a very concrete issue that drew people. This is very abstract, but if you say to the tree board, hey, would you take a look at this and see whether this has any impact on what your goals are? They'll take a look, because it affects them.
Yeah, and we've worked, like I said, we have worked with a lot of committees, cemetery committee, rec board. There are a number of committees that we've worked with, but the city of Montpelier has 22 committees or more. So, yeah, we probably.
That's at least 22 people who might get engaged, probably more like 44 or 112.
And they have, like I said, we have engaged a number of them.
Well, maybe one idea is for the next meetings, we can make sure to copy, I mean, do we have the emails for the chairs for all the committees?
Evelyn did send out notices
okay.
to the various
She did,
committees,
okay.
but we're gonna keep making more pushes. This was the first one. We want to just start to roll these things out. Probably a little easier to roll it out with a smaller group to get more interaction with folks. And we certainly want to, over time, keep building this up and getting more and more input. And we're going to keep track of who's not here and who we haven't heard from. So, if we don't have any housing committee members, then we're going to do a special reach out to them, or historic. I know the historic folks weren't able to make it. A number of them are looking to try to participate in the when we do the Zoom one. They wanted to participate, but they're going to participate when we do the Zoom meeting.
A question about the storyboards online. Is there an easy way to copy that so that I ultimately have like a printed copy of it? If I wanted to look at the words and read it more easily.
I'd have to ask how that prints out without doing snap, without doing.
Yeah.
If
there is, it would just be helpful to know.
Yeah, if there's a way that can get.
The
Yeah.
storyboards are really hard to read.
Oh, are they hard to read online?
You can print it out, I mean, just abstract it. When I read a book, I read top to bottom and take the information. It's just like, you gotta visually move around on it.
Okay.
I would like a single document.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for a visual like this, but when you're trying to really dig into it online especially, it seems like, having both would be good, having a format to generate.
Yeah, these are PDF'd, and these will actually be in when the web is done, you could download and print those out. We're gonna have to probably reformat them for printout, simply because if you were to print this out on 8.5 by 11, you wouldn't be able to read it. So there will be a piece that has to be that way. Legally, we have to have a piece that is printable, because these can be used in Act 250 hearings. So people have to be able to point to either for or against, in support of my application, or an opponent to a project can point to the goals or policies to go through and say, this is inconsistent with the goals and policies of the city plan.
And the other small trivial thing about
Nope.
printing that is the density. PDW does it all the time with lots of colors in their presentations, their slides, and you've got it here. But when you go to print that, that's a lot of ink.
Oh.
That's a lot of ink.
You
So
can print
just think about that.
You can print in black and white.
Even you print in black and white, then you have a background like that blue.
Yeah, with the bottom, the background. It is white in the background, which will help.
Anyway, I'll just put that out there. If you need, you find a way to make it printable.
Yeah, we are eventually going to have to do that for legal reasons. Evelyn is trained, and she is doing all of the reviews to try to make sure that, and so is SE Group. They are the group that is doing the storyboard. So the storyboard part, they are all trained to make sure that there is an analysis they can do to make sure that they're colorblind compatible, so we don't have issues running in where people miss out. So there's a lot of ADA, they're written in a format that meets the ADA requirements for web-based plans.
But this shows you, there are all kinds of minds. Some people can read a PDF text better than they can do this. I mean, maybe, in Plano, Texas, they just have one type of person. I think it's really a mistake not to have a straight PDF version, both because it's easier to change and because some people, can read it better that way. I mean, I happen to be able to, print it out, but it wasn't obvious how to do it.
So, oh, to look at the boards, go in small groups, or?
We can do
Can I
it.
ask a general question first?
Sure.
I'm sorry. How do we make sure, this has been 7 or 8 years, right? You guys are, so, and you said you want to make sure that we're on the right track. And how do we make sure that we're not sitting here 7 years from now saying, yep, we know everything's approved and now we're implementing it? I mean, that 7 years is a long time.
Yeah, it definitely is a long time, and we've had a lot of everything kind of.
3 years is damn it.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, there's been a lot that, and a lot of this took a lot longer. Developing these pieces took a lot of time for the implementation strategies. I guess what I would say is, well, first of all, we've got a hard deadline. We've got to have something readopted by December of 25. That's 25, or 20 months away. But we think, as we said, lots of committees have looked at all these pieces, and it's now kind of getting to where we're bringing it to the public to go through and say, I helped frame out what would be what the aspirations and goals and strategies are for historic resources. But the Historic Commission are the ones that worked on it, and they're the experts in the field. And so this is no longer my plan. And Historic Resources then came back to the Planning Commission, and they reviewed it, and they made changes. And so it's the Planning Commission's plan now. So there's a lot that's changed, but really it's been developed by a lot of residents of Montpelier. So I don't think when we get down to the nuts and bolts that we're going to be that far off. There may be policy things that everybody's got a difference with. Some people want something more important than others, but I think we're going to be pretty close. So, this is where we need to start working on those finer points of, what do you think of where we're going with the historic resources or arts and culture or housing? And then we'll make those changes, and I'm comfortable, confident, as long as you don't get any more floods, we're going to be, there's a lot of resources right now going into pushing this over the finish line. And so whether we're ready to go this fall or whether it's in the winter, the public hearing process is going to be coming up. Next year, this time, I'm hoping to be sitting in front of the city council and having the council, because who knows how long they took. Donna's been on the council, was on the council for a long time, and these could get to council and take a number of meetings. But the hope is that we would have it in front of the council so they've got it and they can make their final decisions based on the public input again. So I guess if we wanted to go through the strategies first, at least if I go through one of the boards, that might give us an opportunity to kind of see how they all fit together if you haven't had a chance to look at them.
I suggest that if we're going to just look at one, that we look at the housing one rather than just,
All right.
that's more of a priority than.
Let's just grab. And I'm trying to just keep them in front so the folks online can see them. Not that they're going to be able to read them, but they can at least see what we're pointing at. So, and if anyone wants to get closer, you're welcome to. So each one of the storyboards, or these aren't the storyboards, these are the strategies. Storyboards are online. These are the strategies. So each one of these 3 strategies is all done in the same way. On the top, there's a set of aspirations. So for housing, the committee came up with 2 aspirations. One is that Montpelier will have an adequate supply of safe and flood-resilient housing that meets the needs of all current and future residents. And the second aspiration is Montpelier will affirmatively further fair housing in order to protect all people from discrimination, promote economic opportunities, and create a more diverse and inclusive community. So that's the big picture, 50,000 foot set of aspirations, but we've got to break that into a number of pieces if we're going to try to implement it. And so we had various rules for doing this. So the aspirations were just meant to be, you know, a vision statement. The goals we really wanted to start to look at, are we looking to maintain things, are we doing well with something? In other words, we can maintain how we're doing. We might increase something, so we might improve something, so we might make small changes, and then there's this idea of transforming. We need to do something completely different. And so we were trying in the goals, you'll notice the first word is always something that's increased the number of homes in Montpelier by a minimum of 30 units. Maintain a mix of housing types, sizes, occupancies, and costs. So the maintain helps to tell you that, in our opinion, we have a good mix of housing. And statistically, I think we do. We've got I've worked in communities in the past where 80% of the housing 85% of the housing are single-family detached housing units on quarter-acre lots. And you can find that all around the country. People are patting themselves on the back now because they've said, we're going to allow a duplex. In our case, we've got a lot of flexible zoning, and we also have a great mix of housing. We do have some single-family detached housing, but we also have condos, we also have townhouses, we have apartments, we have duplexes, quadplexes, so we have a good mix. So that's why that's maintained. Increase the number of homes is simply because we've got a housing shortage. So we recognize we need to increase the number of housing. We're going to maintain the housing mix. We're going to improve the safety, health, and flood resiliency of our homes. So it was our opinion that our homes don't meet that aspiration yet, that we have safe, healthy, and flood resilient homes. We need to continue to improve that. Peter.
I realize that because of the flood last summer, flooding is on everybody's mind. But I've suggested before, and I'm going to suggest it again, climate change resiliency. It's not just flooding. We need to have resilient homes, not just about floods. I'm nowhere near a flood, but I'm still going to be impacted. And I think that flooding is too specific.
Okay.
It's a flooding and other aspect. If you want to draw attention to flooding, because everyone will pay attention to that, and other challenges due to climate change. It's changing our forests. It's changing our gardens. It's changing our transportation.
Yep, those are good comments, and we'll look at those. A number of these have been edited and re-edited a number of times, and so that's one we should have another conversation on. This was all written before the flood, by the way, so that was already on our minds before the flooding happened. Increase the number of homes that are universally accessible on the first floor. So this gets to kind of ADA. We had, in the past, we've talked about, one of the aspirations that was written in the past was housing for all. We're going to keep it simple, housing for all. And that means we've got to think about everybody's housing needs, including accessibility. If people have only a limited, if you're have ADA issues, you need accessibility issues, then it shouldn't be just for a limited number of housing units. You should be able to visit your friends and family. Just because you can live in an accessible unit doesn't mean you're allowed to visit your friends who aren't in accessible units. So we wanted to have a goal of trying to increase the number of homes that are universally accessible, just so we can get more units available and to increase just everybody's ability to participate. Peter.
Again, first floor. Why just first floor? The problem with so many of these goals here is that you're thinking about owners, not renters. There's almost no mention of rental apartments. There are buildings that have elevators. There are buildings that have chair lifts. Why first floor? Universally accessible.
Yep, and they had a conversation about that, and the issue just comes up with the cost and difficulty of making everything universally accessible. There are still cost barriers to that, and requiring second floor accessibility could inhibit people from being able to build new units.
It's a goal, it's not a requirement, it's a goal.
And-
Goals can't get as specific as requirements. You don't want them to be. But if your goal, I just think having first floor in a goal, it's like having flood. It's too specific. It excludes a whole bunch of people. And if you look at all the goals, there's just one slight mention of rental.
But any structure or home that's improved includes whoever lives in them, whether you own it or rent it or get it for free. It's the structure we're talking about.
No, it isn't. Look at the goals, Donna. If you read all the goals, if Mike's gonna do it, there's a clear emphasis on people who own their building.
I don't think anybody saw it that way, because, maintaining mixes of housing types, improving safety and healthy, that's not just for single family homes, that's for rentals. Increasing the number of homes that are universally accessible, that's also rental.
Yeah, but I think,
That
in this
was-
meeting, we're also welcoming other ways, I think, to express it, or, new goals that are suggested. I'd just like to welcome, suggestions.
Yeah,
Reframing.
Well, the original, I was on the housing task force, and we sent in our goals. We used the word rental, affordable, range of incomes, energy efficient, resilient in the face of disasters. None of those words are in there.
yep, and these have all gone through various processes. So we, again, there was a proposal that was made to the Housing Committee that you were there for. The Housing Committee made changes, and the Planning Commission has since made changes as well. So we'll certainly take all those comments and go back and revisit these and see if we want to go back and look at those previous versions. Again, we've got different members of the Planning Commission now. Yes?
As I apologize for missing the beginning of this.
Nope.
I didn't realize this was happening until I saw it on Facebook. But when we say number 4, increase the number of houses that are universally accessible, what's the scope of that? I mean, are you talking private homes? Are you talking city-built homes? Are you talking?
So we'll get a little bit to that in the next, right when I get through. Let me run through this, and then hopefully my next part will answer your question.
A quick second question.
Yes.
Do we maintain metrics on all these today?
Uh,
Or how do you know that you're increasing it?
We don't, we've got some of them that we can, some of them that we can't. And we've tried, and there's been varying opinions on the commission, especially over the years, as to how much we want to emphasize measurable over having the goal. And then maybe having metrics as a separate column, which we did. When we did these online in the tables, there was a separate column for the metric that we would use. A couple of them did get built in, like a minimum of 30 homes per year. In other cases, it was left more general in the goal statement and said, let's find measurables afterwards.
But we do have some data through the property tax on how many duplexes and condos, as far as the kind of structures we have in town.
But accessibility, we
Yeah.
probably don't have as much of
We
a
don't have
count
as much of-
of how many accessible units. So the last two, the last two go to the aspiration B. So these first four really are breaking down how we have aspiration A, and these last two kind of go to aspiration B. So maintain the city's commitment to affirmatively further fair and accessible housing by focusing on areas where needs are not currently being met, and increase support for partners in the development of housing that are not provided by the private market. So these two reflect a lot of the work that we do through with Downstreet or other housing partners to work on, like I said, housing that's not provided by the private market. So affirmatively furthering fair housing it's a catchphrase, it's a requirement for HUD that you'll see. So it is a kind of reflecting our statement of what we are trying to do as a community, so that way we can keep ourselves consistent with those goals. Not only for the federal reason, but because it's what the city believes in as its policy and its goals. So that's why you have that funny wording of affirmatively furthering fair housing. It's kind of a funny phrase, but it's a term of art that goes for HUD. That's why we didn't change it to be more reader friendly, I guess. And getting back to the other question, so each one of these various implementation strategies that you see here, the idea is, and you'll find this, as a professional planner, I can go and pick up another community's plan and look at it, and they'll have goals. And if you read the strategies, none of the strategies are implementing the goals. They might be good strategies, but they're not actually reflective of the goals. Or vice versa, you might just have things. And so what we wanted to do is have things and when we originally did this, we would have increased the number of housing and we'd have all the strategies. And then we would have this other one, we'd have all the strategies. And some of them duplicated. So when we put this together, we combined like unified development regulations, your zoning regulations. It helps us implement goals 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So the question of if we have a goal, we don't have any strategies, it's not really a goal. I mean, there's nothing strategic, you're not really trying to do it. There's no sense putting in a goal if you're not going to bother putting in the strategies to help implement it. So every time you see a goal, there is always at least one implementation strategy. So the question on what are we doing about number 4 for increasing the number of accessible units, it has fit into the country club master plan, because those will all be new units, and by law they will have to be ADA. It is not in the regulations, so we are not requiring it. And we're looking for number 4. Number 4, ADA accessibility program. We have an ADA accessibility program. We are proposing to amend it. And for many years, the city had an ADA revolving loan fund for accessibility projects. It was administratively difficult, rarely used, and now lacks funding. The planning department recommends making a program similar to the first-time homebuyer program, but with new funding, but new funding will need to be set aside and match existing program already provided by organizations such as Vermont Center for Independent Living. So we're not requiring people to make their units more accessible, but we wanted to establish a program, and there are different ways of implementing things, one being a program, and the idea being if you needed to or wanted to make your apartment building more accessible, that you could go to Vermont Center for Independent Living, VCIL, and maybe we would have a program that would allow us to match those funds. So if they gave $5,000, we could give $5,000 and make it more cost effective for a landlord to be able to make their units more accessible. So that's the strategy, the primary strategy that was put in place there was to work with that. Now, the reality is there's probably other ones that I could probably come up with. The designated downtown program I could have probably put in here as well. If you're in the designated downtown, it's one of the programs the state offers is if you're in the designated downtown, you can get grants to do accessibility. So there are a number of things we could potentially add in another strategy because it doesn't look like actually designated downtown is here. We should probably add in number 4 into that as well because there are programs in there. Does that kind of make sense? And then each one of these strategies, so each one of these is a separate one. Strategies, we think strategies in 5 ways. If you don't know what we're doing or we need more information, one strategy can be we need to do a study and figure out what to do. We don't know what to do, we need to do a study. Another one is permits. So we want to require people to do things. So we're going to change our zoning, change some regulations. Another one is programs. Programs are not requirements. Those are things we can give you some money or give you a tax break. We can have various ways of helping people through programs. Those usually require money. So that's usually the catch with programs. You've got policies. That's how the city uses its own resources. So how we use the city streets, how we use City Hall. We may have a goal to be net zero by 2030, which we do. Well, that's all going to be implemented through policies because we're not asking the public to do anything. That's just me and my coworkers and city council doing our jobs differently. That's what policies look at. And then the last one is programs, plans. Projects, there we go, thank you. Projects is the last one. So a project is something we do once. We're only gonna build one transit center. So if we got a project, if you've got an issue, sometimes a project is the way you're gonna fix it. And we do a number of projects around town. So those are the 5 things, and they're all kind of intermixed in here. A lot of them for housing probably come down to programs, but that's how we envision things. We're only gonna do one country club road, so that's a project. Utility, so just as, I'm not gonna read these, but I'll just give what the actual program is or what the strategy is. So we have country club road, we have utility infrastructure incentive program. This is recommended to be new. The city actually just did that 5 days ago. Neighborhood Development Area Program, so that's NDA, that's a state program. Unified Development Regulations, zoning bylaws, we already do that. It's talking about amending it though. Housing Marketing Outreach Program, and I believe that's looking at trying to help to get more builders to come to town because we just don't have enough people to build the housing. TIF, Tax Increment Finance, Tax Stabilization Programs, Montpelier Accessory Dwelling Unit Program, the Designated Downtown Program, the Growth Center Program. Those last 2 are state programs that we participate in. Public-private partnerships for housing. Code enforcement, those help the safety. Automatic sprinkler requirements for buildings, that's safety. Sprinkler incentive program, that's for safety. First-time home buyer program, that's actually been eliminated. So there's one, as Peter's pointing out, we'll have to go through that one. The homelessness task force, I think it's technically still in the books, but the homelessness task force isn't going to re-up that one. River hazard area regulations, again, that's for safety. ADA program we talked about. The affordable housing project, so this is a new program. Just sponsored different programs and special ones. In particular, the city would like to identify projects to help disadvantaged groups such as refugees, asylum seekers, group homes, persons reintegrating from incarceration and the homeless. We have a fair housing assessment we still need to do. That goes to our plan. That's something we just need to make sure we do periodically to evaluate how we're doing. So you do a fair housing assessment to make sure somebody independent from outside comes in and evaluates the city, the programs that we do, and all the other pieces to make sure that we're meeting our obligations under the Fair Housing Act. Fair housing policy and the Housing Trust Fund. So these are all of the strategies that Housing Committee and Planning Commission have come up with. The list had been much bigger and it gets, we narrow down. These are the ones that sat there as priorities. And there are other ideas that didn't make the cut. So, Peter.
Mike, you've got all of these things looking like they're all sort of equivalent. There's no hierarchy here. There's not even any numbers here. This is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. You've got Country Club Road right at the top, which that says something, and I think it's important. But then right under it, you've got, what's number 2? Right under it?
The Utility Infrastructure Program.
Which is this which is a small program. You've got things on there that we don't do anymore. I understand you haven't looked at it in 2.5 years, but there should be a way of at least grouping them. I think Donna might have been getting at that, I'm not sure. Grouping them so you've got the most important ones together, and you start out with them. This is sort of inchoate, looking at them spread out like this. You used to have it in a spreadsheet, and in a spreadsheet, you could select by priority. So they would list priority-wise, or you could select by cost. So you could, but by freezing it here, you've lost the ability to kind of get your arms around it. This is an exhausting list to go through, because you go from really important things to things we're not even going to do.
Would you want to go by priority if you were going to organize them, to put all the high priorities together, then all the mediums, and then low?
I think this is up to the Planning Commission. I liked the fact that it was in a spreadsheet again. I understand that this is visual and colorful and so forth, but a spreadsheet allows the user to make that decision about looking at it in priority order. I think, yes, you should have a little vote about what are the most important ones, whether it's because of priority or cost or some combination, and put those together, or maybe separate them out, pull out the projects and the programs, because they're all smaller. Have the big ideas first. I don't know. That's for you guys to decide. But some kind of order, if it's going to be frozen, have it be frozen in a way that it's likely, but frozen, I mean, you can't manipulate it on a spreadsheet, right? Okay. That have there be some kind of organizer that allows people to not have to go through the whole thing, because by the time you get to the last one, you're really tired.
No, it's a good point. And we'll certainly have to decide what would be our organizing factor for doing those. We could certainly group them by, the plans and then the programs and the strategies, or we can do them by priority.
Well, you sort of have them there, and I like the color ribbon, that the multi-colors are there. It keeps reminding you this is relating to many goals. Within your goals, if your goals are a priority, then to me, then all the strategies under them are comparable priorities. So even by color alone, you almost can see what has the purple and the red.
Yeah, when we did these, we intentionally went and said we weren't trying to prioritize goals, even though they're labeled 1 through 6. It's not that number 1 was more important than number 6. We could, yes, and that would be that would take another level of discussions about how to organize and prioritize. I mean, it's not always easy. I mean, I could probably have a meeting just on prioritizing which 6 of these, which ones are the most, which one's 3, which one's 4, is one or more.
When you look at the city plan and you're trying to spend money or not, how do you do that without going back to the priority of your goals? So at some point you got to bite the bullet. Now, if you don't do it, then the council, somebody else will do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and some of this is going to come down to hearing from the public on which ones are, how close are we when we've labeled these, which I should have pointed to everyone who hasn't been up close. There's cost, priority, and partners. So we've got players on each one of these as to who the primary person is that's working on this. However we want, we've got to make sure we've got those also accurate. So if we know we've got all these accurate, then it's just a matter of us sitting down and deciding, okay, how are we going to organize these? And it is confusing, and we did do like the Excel spreadsheets, but that's really not user friendly to the general public. There's a lot of explaining about the tabs on the bottom and the tabs on the tops, and so we wanted to come up with a different way, and we have a template that we haven't been able to get to work. John Adams, who is on our commission, had a way of taking, the reason why they're all in Excel is because we could combine all the Excels And then there would be a searchable way that people could go in to be able to go through and say, show me all the ones that, you know, as Peter said, whatever, show me all the high priorities, or show me all of the programs, or show me all the high priority programs that are done with the Planning Commission. And it would be a searchable database that could work. It had two issues. One was, we haven't actually gotten that program to work. The second issue was, we still had to have static strategies so that way they could be usable in Act 250. So we have to have this. We might end up, if this works, we might end up with both. The searchable piece as well as the static piece.
I think you should.
The tricky part is making sure that everything is identical, because nothing can change. You know, we go in and fix this one on this one, we've got to fix it on the other one. So we'll probably get everything okay first, and then when we're all done, make the searchable database so that way it's, because once it's done, it's fixed and it locks in.
So among the public, do you want the public to give you input to priorities of goals?
Yeah, if people have thoughts about what some of our things are, and you know, as you said, maybe adding the timeline, we'll talk about that. Maybe it makes a difference, because some of these things, this fair housing policy, Kevin hasn't even been with us for a while, these were things we were working on. We wanted to have a fair housing policy, and really have a nice, clean policy for City Council to adopt. We don't technically have an adopted policy by the City Council on fair housing. I actually think these got crisscrossed, so I'm gonna have to double check on those. Make sure we got a note on that. So the cost and the priority are backwards for the housing policy. Because it's a low cost, high priority item. Because it's just adopting it. In this case, it says it's a high cost, so I'm going to have to double check to make sure that all of these match up.
But isn't that a thread that runs through everything? That's like, you know, you're going to do all these projects with fair housing projects. So some are like more policy than actual projects.
So we do fair housing and we act in that way, but we haven't officially adopted a policy. And that was one we wanted to work with the Fair Housing Commission to come up with that document you see. Whereas, ... whereas, ... whereas, ... Therefore, the City Council hereby adopts a policy of this. And therefore, we've got something we can really stick on the wall that when we cross our own line, people can point to and say, that's not our policy. Our policy is this, because we adopted that policy. We don't have very many of those adopted policies. We do have a handful of them that have come through. But we wanted to have that for fair housing.
Well, the fair housing to me would seem to go under the Social Justice Committee actually more than the Homeless Task Force.
Probably, yes. Yep, that's a good recommendation. So,
I would just like to hear people's priorities for these goals, if this is what we're talking about, you know. I'm wondering if everyone has even internalized the goals, or if you kind of need to get a closer look at it.
I think it would be good to be able to get up and look around and see the
Yeah.
storyboards.
So I would like to hear what everyone thinks of these goals, and if there's a priority ranking for you personally, or what you think is best for Montpelier, you know. So I don't know if anybody has.
I don't know, what is on your agenda? Have you explained enough so that it would be appropriate to start looking around?
I hope so. I just wanted to be able to go through, so as you look at the other boards, you kind of know the same thought. Okay, I can see the aspirations, I can see the goals, I can see how these play. So yeah, the arts and culture, that one came a lot out of the public art master plan that was adopted in 2019, 2020. So that one, for anyone who was part of that process, you should see a lot of similarities, a lot of things that say, hey, we should be doing this. So that's where that came out of. And historic resources, a lot of that really is from work that Historic Preservation Commission was working on.
Sometimes it helps us to, for myself, just pick my top 3 out of the 6 you have there versus putting them all in order.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, anything, and like we said, anything that comes out, that comes to mind, like I said, the timelines, we had the partners, I think there was a different line that was also in there. There were two lines, and I wonder if the
One
other
was
one.
partners, the other was the principal player.
The principal player, I would have probably wanted to see the principal player. Some of these were developed last week while I was on vacation. I didn't get to proof them until after I got back, so.
So you've got some principal players and you've got some partners, a mix of them, and I think if you can only have one, it should be who is primarily responsible.
Or just main players, might incorporate both of them.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we put the thought just behind it. We wanted to have that principal players in there because if we don't, if you have goals and strategies and nobody's actually assigned to it, then you can't actually go back. Like I said, there's always, you gotta be able to go back and say, that was Mike, that was on your plate to get done, and it didn't get done. And there may be a good reason for it, but if it didn't get done.
Well, just to me, there's difference in the word partners, that's my hang-up, is that you have staff as partners and you have other entities as partners. And I see other entities as partners. Versus there are headings that could include both staff and partners, non-staff partners.
The spreadsheet had both.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
That may be just keeping people's minds more inclusive to.
So yeah, take some time, take a look, read through them, and see what you think. And like we said, the planning commission is here to answer questions. I'm here to answer questions. And this is just the first half. The other half are the storyboards online, which might be a little bit more tricky. We've got computers getting fired up, and I can fire up another computer. I see a couple other folks have computers, but if there are certainly issues like they're not very readable, then we're going to have to work on. I'll have to go back to SE Group and either look at the sizes of the fonts or.
What words do I look for to find storyboards? I found a plan for storyboards.
So.
I just have the things that went down.
I'm probably gonna go ahead and go into this one. Mike's also got.
It should be the big square that.
I was already in the plan.
Let's just play around a little bit with
Put
that.
some feedback in there.
It's a feedback, so I think that's
Well, no,
better
it's
with
like,
the
where
too.
is that? Okay.
It allows me to actually.
Go to me. Go to me.
You guys can read and understand, right?
Your comments are often very helpful, I think, don't you?
Definitely, because not only does it give you a record of, okay, here's what I said, here's what my input is, and here's why I'm
All
saying
right,
this.
now go to the bottom.
Yeah,
And
I
then
will
be a
see
big
You know,
tile.
I will see.
off the top of my head, I may not have two
There it is.
Just that's the way.
Yeah, well, from our, you know, sometimes it's like
Right there, I think you got it.
you don't like
Okay,
this.
thank you, thank you.
There it is.
You're right, you're
Right
gonna,
there. Click
you're
on
gonna
that.
communicate differently in writing, right? Because that part of your brain that's gonna be thinking.
Well, yeah, and my training as an appraiser, it's like, I'm
No,
much
that's-
better. Yeah, I do sometimes. I'm talking about just off the top of my head.
I think this is, I think I just joined the planning commission. This was the first one that
Now
I've
you
ever seen.
see.
Everyone else for like
Now
2
you go
years.
down.
Yeah.
The summary of what we're doing.
Hey, that's my
Of the process there. That's the historic resources storyboard and housing storyboard. So click on housing storyboard.
I do understand this.
Formatting.
Issue.
Our plan to achieve housing for all.
Well,
Another
it's not.
introduction and text.
I think that's what you guys are doing right now.
Now look at the plan in context. So it's got pictures
So what am I
up top.
searching on?
It's a little bit more difficult on your phone.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't thinking
But it goes in, it's got a little bit interactive. Yeah, it'll highlight condos, it'll highlight where the condos are.
But initially Tim was saying, because his first thing is, okay, you can come in off town hill,
And it would show up.
or you come in off of
So you have that.
Okay, I'll bring my other thing next time.
But that's where
But
the,
it'll help me at home, that's
yeah,
good.
so that's where it gets, the storyboard then, if you keep going down.
I was
Now you're gotta get out
All right, now the navigation.
So navigation, so then it goes through, so look through the map cards,
you look at what White and Burke had to bring infrastructure up, it's another 60 million, so it's another half of what we already have bonded for. And then you put in another 60 million for another road, we're essentially doubling our bonding cost, but we're 1,900 households in Montpelier. 1,200 are income sensitive, or qualify for the tax. You know how the state offsets the taxes. So I'm going, and we have 24% is aging, is over 65, and 40% are single. It's like, you saw the pushback on the school budget, and that was triple what, our current budget is. And I'm just going, where does it go for?
Like you're looking at the cost of it, and because you're getting a quote from builders.
Oh, yeah.
Like you look at the cost of it, and it's like, this is 500 a square foot. I think it's great for customers. That's what I think. That's what I think. It's like, make it as nice as possible. If you could have gotten your HUD to go in there and do something, that would have been great. Usually, like double the money in 18 months or something.
There was a 50% increase, 25% a year, which I actually looked at what our housing increase. It increases about 6 or 7% a year, so he made out well.
He did just fine.
Well, the other thing that was interesting too is I told a couple people, so I know Michael Ryan as an appraiser. He does consulting work for the state. So we're doing a big project down Brattleboro, and we had him look at commercial land, residential development land all over the state, just to say, what are the trends, and he basically said over the last 10 years, large parcel of land like this have been flat in value. So in other words, that 1.2 million, should have paid more than 1.5.
Well, and even, just for my experience with Isabel, basically that land is worth what it costs to develop. Like, you're not getting, so I was down meeting with a developer in Chapel House, right? Like, he took an $800,000 piece of land and took even time of the process, it's now like 6 months, right? For 3 years, it takes some risk, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. And he's got to have his 15 or 20% profit.
But he's, that's like here, we're basically, like when it's like, we're breaking even. Like to do this, we're breaking even, because there isn't, and there's no value to the excess land and all that stuff. I mean, I think, have you seen that Pennington, the guys from Campbell?
Oh yeah.
I think something like that, and I know that was exactly why Act 250 was enacted, I hate that stuff, but it's like, that's, if you don't have a big master plan, that likes a bunch, like, you look at those master plan communities, that's the only way. If you live in somewhere out in Vegas, that's where it's going. It's where you're going, right? It's like, why are you making money all in the back half of that thing? The first half of it was just sunk costs. Like, we have to make it beautiful so people understand where it's going. This is not anywhere near the scale. We're going to get money.
Yeah,
and the county can kind of, something like that, that's what you gotta think decades, right? And I think it's a 30-year challenge.
Yeah, exactly, because that's one of the things that I was going to point out too, is, I'm originally from San Francisco, from the Bay Area, and I did real estate appraisal out there. So I saw, like, KB Home would buy these huge parcels of land for 8, 10, 12 million bucks, but they would phase it out over, it would be a 10-year plan down in Fremont or in Greenwood, wherever they happen to find the land that, okay, this makes sense, here's where it's at. But the other thing too is, I always want to see, we have some really good housing studies as far as what the actual needs are for the community. And my big issue is like, okay, well, I know that right now we have less than a 1% vacancy rate. So Mike's saying we need to really increase the amount of rental units that we have available.
Well, it's like number 300. I don't know where that came from. Did you see that? Somebody said 300 would produce a 5% vacancy. Is that right? I don't know where that data comes from.
That's one of my questions. I've been also looking at, so the population in Montpelier has been relatively static since 1940. The big bump was 1950, 1960 with all the, World War II veterans coming back. We went up 2% from 2010, or actually was it 2010 to 2023? It was like a 2.4% bump. So it's small. Chittenden County, Burlington's like 7%.
And you're able to do some bigger projects.
Yeah. But you know, there's the problem you have here, and I've talked to Josh Schwinn about this, is like, okay, you've got your big employer, is the state, National Life, and everything else is mom and pop. And, you know, you're not gonna grow your economic base here. I think you're kind of limited, and with the recent flooding, you hear all the big downtown businesses are struggling. I'm worried. I'm really worried. Do you have another flood or another? I think we're gonna have a big in downtown. It's like, well, what's the recovery plan? How do we do that?
This is personal. I know you're a state employee. My wife hears it all the time. I just wish the governor has been these buildings, you know, they should have just, I think they should have just said, look, you're getting all back now. My wife's when they say 6 feet of water, I saw a video. It's like 6 feet of water. They should never, because they're they like move the utilities to waste of money.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Contractor, real great, that thing should have been demolished. The one next door to it, and whatever goes in there afterwards, it should be up, 10 feet or something to the first level. They do this all over the place. Just make it, yeah, I'm a little upset, like, come on.
Oh yeah.
Just get one girl to guess for a while.
Yeah.
Tell us what the plan is. What are you guys doing?
Exactly. I mean, I hate to say that you have to have sort of a Florida type of development. You ever see those ones that are built down in Carolina or something? They're up on the stilts. That's what you have to do.
They do. And I think there's code, right? Like, I don't know, but you can have some stuff down there, but it's gotta be basically like, it's gotta be able to be
Exactly.
an extra bedroom or something, you know, other than that, like, it's like, this is totally something that can get destroyed, and we know it. That's, you know, there's all kinds of things to look at. We went and looked at, so there's a really beautiful building, it's a historic building next to, so across from Capitol Plaza.
Oh yeah,
So that was supposed to like go up for sale. The city has first like,
Is that the one that was on
So is the, sorry,
well, we're happy for you.
Why does the city need a fair housing policy?
I think it sort of says it right
But aren't they legally required to do those things anyway? So the city's not a landlord, the city is housing.
Well, they got rid of their zoning, and they, apparently it's been quite a while that
they're finally starting to see some results. They're actually seeing some growth in housing and affordable housing because they changed, they got rid of the zoning and they allowed the ADUs.
I mean, we've talked about it ourselves. It's like, can I really afford my house? Can you pay these property taxes? It's like, hey, why don't you put the garage, up the level above the garage, and put a little
So there's federal and state guidelines.
whatever it is, whether it's a full-time person or Airbnb or whatever, I like to pay my property taxes.
Exactly, yeah.
I just don't know. When we lived in Baltimore, they actually, so they went through this, like they had a real issue in Baltimore, all kinds of stuff, and they sold these dollar homes. But then all these guys were getting gentrified, people were getting priced out, and they said, I think it's like 65, like whatever.
I'm not an expert.
That's something. Maybe it's a way to look at it, but like, it's just like, we're never gonna work something out of my home.
Exactly.
We're on an application, right, to just keep up with whatever is happening in the game, you know? So you do worry about that. That can help, ADUs can help a lot.
You should ask why you I was talking to a number of people for recent assessment. And of course, the school thing, I mean, the budget passed again, but it's gonna go up another 14%. You know, something to go about at what point, I mean, I'm hoping the legislature can come up with a better solution than what they're trying to, which Scott, I think, may veto, which rightly so. In Vermont, only Montpelier, but we used to be coming up from Boston. We moved to Boston in 2000, and we used to rent up in Grand Isle every year during the summer. And then my wife and I would tour around, because we were thinking we want to relocate to Vermont at some point. So we've been around enough. So we've been to the south part of the state, southwest, southeast.
We lived in Northville for 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And you start talking, and you see it with Roxbury right now, you start talking about closing the schools. You go up in New Hampshire, it's like, what? It's all regional schools. This is how you have to do it. Yeah, your kid has to ride a bus. That's the, if you want to live in a beautiful farmhouse, like away from people, your kid's riding a bus to school.
Oh, yeah.
That's the trade-off. We all get it. It's the only way to get everything right. You know, you start talking about these guys.
Yeah, that's the hope, is that we'll be able to come back and say, all right.
Oh, yeah.
What we targeted, the housing committee is what we had when we were on the house, you were running the reservation committee, was like, I got on this committee, I've been here for 4 years, I don't know what we do. We're going to come up and say, this is our program. That's right. It's really tough. What it is, it's our bonus account. We need money. Principles like many of the committees principles like
It's a lot. It's overwhelming.
I'll send you a copy of Doug Hoffman's report, the state auditor. He said they're a mixed bag at best. He says, and the problem is, most of them don't end up resulting in the tax benefits that are projected. And he said that what ends up happening is it ends up going back on the taxpayers. And 75% of our budget in Montpelier, we don't have a strong enough commercial tax base, so it goes on to the onus of individual taxpayers. But I'll send you, he's got a 48-page report that says, you know, here's what I've done. He's analyzed all of them. He actually said that economic policy use of Williston is the one, if you're going to do a tax, they actually look at the demographics. They actually do some real serious number crunching. And so they're more realistic projections. He said they're actually
I'd
modeling.
love to see it, because we're not doing it. We're gonna try to get whatever this, we're gonna try to get this thing, it's gonna
Yeah.
But I'd love to see, like, how do you do it? I think they want some kind of guarantees, right? Like, it's like a certain number of housing, or a certain amount of roll, right? Like, it's like you have to guarantee or something, right?
And so what we end up doing is we were able to tap into the muni bond fund at a fairly low rate. But the other thing too is the administrative costs. Burlington pays them 6 figures a year.
And I said, you know, here's my issue. This is sort of anecdotal. All the dog walkers that I know we used to walk around the park, we're all with all this policy change, we don't feel comfortable being there. And I talked to somebody today, I said, at one point, if they think everybody has to be on.
But he's been
Don't imagine if you're on a trip, you're supposed to be off leash,
So he's-
somebody in
he
videos
filed-
of the kids in the park area.
We met at a conference, I was there supporting
The
chair was on the Zoom, so I was gonna.
The big block next to
That's
He actually
more
did, I was on this.
so people just like,
Actually, he had a threshold for even got me up here, he was gonna say something, but then it just went to.
unpermitted neighbors, we have
Talking about dog, we're talking about dog parks, Mike.
Everybody was gonna be okay, and I think we can get a question, and we'll probably get all together, so we can close up the meeting and let our,
Hey, please do send me those stuff on the TikTok. I'm personally interested in seeing
I'll
it.
send you that, and then you're also on the planning commission too.
She's the chair now, so.
Excellent, congratulations. So I was just telling Gabe that I was gonna send him, there's an audit report about TIF districts, because that's one of my concerns. It's a 48-page report from 2010, it's kind of a mixed bag. It says, I'm Joe, hey. Yeah.
It came out here. I was trying to find out who said it.
Yeah. So basically, Doug Hoffman, the state auditor, came out with a report, a 48-page report. They kind of did an analysis. It says, here's the pros, here's the cons. It says most of them don't result in the tax benefits that the communities are expecting. And there's a shortfall, and of course the onus comes back on the individual taxpayers. And I was just telling Gabe, I said, our commercial district is hurting. We don't have a really strong commercial base. 75% of Montpelier's budget comes from individual taxpayers. So if it fails, it's going to be higher taxes for us here. The other thing too is I was telling Gabe that the city of Burlington has a TIF district. It costs them $600 a year to administer it. They're really costly to administer because you have to submit reports every year to quantify by stuff. So there are some concerns I have about the TIF district. I honestly think, and I'm a real estate appraiser by background, what I've seen is zoning changes, and if you do tax abatements, are far more effective than a TIF. But I know that, you know, obviously it costs money if you can get a 3% loan to help get this infrastructure in. So I certainly understand.
Great, yeah, great. So yeah, I'd love to see that report.
Yeah. Because I'm going to actually send a copy of Doug Hoffer's, the auditor's report for 2022 to Gabe, to her, and then you are Carlton. Okay, all right. Sure. Yeah, because I know that that's going to come back up. I know that they've been pushing pretty hard for the TIF district, and I just have some concerns about it.
You know, did you recently hear about, Meredith Whitney talking about a new?
I've heard the name, but I don't.
So there's a new mortgage. I'm sorry. In May, an opportunity is rolling out where it's going to save all of, everyone took out second mortgage for medical funds.
Yeah.
It's to relieve that.
Oh, interesting.
So just, I'm still digging into it, but someone with your background, you should talk, look at that because the opportunities that that's going to be, and I think we're trying to put together, the federal government's going to push it for some.
Okay.
Because it's like a lifeline, and it'll really
We'll get a small group of 10 years, and that's a good start for us, because we'll learn from our mistakes on what works, what doesn't work.
Just to do 5 more of these like this.
No, we're gonna need
How do you
bigger ones.
communication in general from the city, I feel like, is poor. frankly, if I can be honest with you. And is it Evelyn?
Evelyn is the new, so 2 years ago, we hired Evelyn to be, she was part-time 2 years ago, and she goes to full-time to be basically the city's first communications coordinator. And it makes a big difference. It's certainly better than it was.
I feel like communication in the city, I miss the CAN program because I used to find out, Peter was my CAN rep, and I used to get information from him as to what was going on and when meetings were and when, so that to me, I think that's
We tried with the CAN. It went and got taken over by another group. They wanted to do it, and then when we wanted it back, they wanted to do it themselves. And so basically, it wasn't from the city not wanting to use CAN or have CAN. It was the fact that we weren't able to, and then it went defunct. And now that it's defunct, we don't have somebody to partner with. And
how much time does it take?
well, it can take quite a bit of time to get it up and running, but it's something that's probably certainly will be back on Evelyn's list of things to look at.
Yeah, because one person sitting at communication is not the same as someone in your neighborhood who you know is tied into what's happening. You have a question, you can ask them. They get the word, they know from them. And so I can't stress that enough in terms of.
Yeah, if you have ideas, you always send them to Evelyn. She's the communications coordinator, and she's the one who's working on finding the gaps in our communication and fixing them. And she's actually really remarkably talented. I've been so impressed that we were able to get her.
All right,
So.
well, I've got to just say one thing about it. You get an email from the city, and it shouldn't be that the font and the body of the, like, I don't know about the technical. It just looks,
I watched some of the old,
I don't know. If I were, from my time in the corporate world, something like that.
rebuild the windows.
Yes, I don't know how she does it exactly.
Yeah, some of them she generates. Some of them come to her and she puts them out. So some of them are not necessarily something she generates. That may be something that the DPW director has put together and said, send this out.
Yeah, but still, if she's a communications person, it should be. I can talk to her about.
She's growing into her position, but yeah.
I think the communication.
I'll let her know. I'll pass it along because I know she's interested in knowing what she could be doing.
Yeah, but there's some minor things I think that would.
Yeah. All right.
So anyway.
Thank you for taking the time to do that.
We thought 2 years ago, Alec had kind of come up with a plan and everything was like status quo. And I understand where he's coming from. He wants to make it more inclusive. There are people who've been afraid to go to the park. People have said, I've been attacked by dogs in the park. It's like, okay, I understand. It's just, things happen.
Yeah.
But I was just commenting, I said, if you put dogs on leash, I said, there is a such thing as leash aggression. I mean, Henry, if have Henry on leash and another dog's on leash, you know how nice Henry is. He gets aggressive sometimes. It depends on the dog. So, I mean, does that exacerbate or make the situation worse?
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest, I have to come out as I'm actually fine with having in covered parts dogs on leash because, I would never take her. She would go off in the woods and scare little, she would suppress her, she would scare little children. But if it were allowed, I might be tempted, to make that choice and do that.
Yeah, true.
Because it's so nice to have dogs on the leash. I don't know. It's like I could just. It's not like when they tell pregnant women that they can't have any dog because that some people just can't monitor you and can't make dogs.
The other thing too is I can also understand, it's like, I've encountered families with little kids and stuff. You know how big Henry is, and he's exuberant, and he likes to go up. Sometimes he jumps. So, in that case, the dog's got to be leashed. I'd like to say key, regular common sense, but unfortunately you can't.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a tough issue.
It's a tough issue, yeah.
I mean, and part of the reason is like, yes, we have development stuff, so I don't know. Oh, it's great. But I don't know how long that's gonna last.
Well, given what I'm talking about, any sort of big development like that, you gotta do it in phases. And it's gotta be like an 8 to 10 year build out, because you can't absorb that many housing units all at once. It's like, you look at any big housing development, whether it's Florida, California, Nevada, it's like, the developers, they don't really sell
Well, so how do you get it? The goals, I know.
You know, like,
One, yeah,
goals. And then there could be like a printout like this on it, so if someone's actually really interested and look, see the implementation strategy.
And you can't find anything, but maybe if they were organized better, like some of the comments were maybe we had higher priority ones, then people can focus on the higher priority.
Definitely, I think.
You gotta either acquire easements or.
One general comment is I shared with Maria, the arts and culture one. It seems like it's completely focused on, mostly on public art, which I think is great, but there's a lot more to arts and culture. And there's a lot of art in Montpelier. There's a lot of studios, there's galleries, there's art walks. So I feel like from that perspective, we have, but arts and culture is really broad, you know, including spaces like this, but creative spaces that should be part of that arts and culture.
Arts and culture was one that came about differently. It wasn't going to be, they were only going to do 10. Kirby wanted to do it, who was our former chair. And so he wrote it, and he worked, and he took it all out of the public art master plan. So it's focused on the public art master plan, but I recognize, a lot of people recognize, it really was taking a bite out of a bigger apple. And it's not the whole picture, but we've been working so long on these other things, we're like, we can't keep going back.
Yeah,
we're going to work on it, but I recognize ones that's missing pieces. There's more in the storyboard. When you read the storyboard, there's more of a conversation of these other spaces, but it still is lacking in the implementation strategy. How do we get more? How do we do a better job of supporting and encouraging more art?
And on the other hand, you know, there's so much going on in the world right now. We don't focus on the absolute priorities like housing and homelessness and climate change, and none of this is going to matter. So, in a way, I know it's a master plan and everything needs to be included, but especially as far as the public's engagement is concerned, the things that are most important. And people in government are not there for because
Well, we've got
you guys live in a little bit of a bubble. In general, that's the way it is, I understand, but
we've got some committees that's the point of having the committees, so they can focus and prioritize these ideas.
I think a lot more needs to be advanced. Honestly, my time in Montpelier, which is
I'm going, but great job.
Okay, thank you.
Comments on Montpelier?
Yes, please do. All right. So I'm
Just pointing out that
so let me just take a minute to just go through and say thank you. Thank you to Maria again for hosting this space. We're going to find out what happens next. We know we need to reschedule for Thursday's meeting. We will get this out. There's going to be a little bit more, hopefully a lot more public outreach for everybody advertising-wise, so more people know about these events coming up. And they're not just coming up now, they're not just coming up this week or this month, they're going to be continuing all summer long into the fall, various chapters, and as we keep adding more chapters, the old chapters will still be up there. So even if it's later in the summer and we're talking about transportation, the historic, the arts, and the housing are all still going to be online for people to comment on. So just keep looking at them, providing us comments on either the storyboards or the implementation strategies, and we look forward to all the comments from the whole public throughout the next 6 months, and let us know. My email is mmiller@montpelier-vt.org, but you can also find a lot of the contact information on our city website for anyone else. So thank you, and that'll be it for tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Chocolate chip cookie. Yeah, thanks for coming out, Jeff.
No problem.
Pleasure,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Community.
And thanks again. I
I
feel bad.
That's a nice thing.
Josh, I tried to get a hold of him, I just